Welcome to the Classic Baseball Radio Clubhouse, a chance to step back from the hectic pace of the game and take some time to look at the history of baseball. I'm Ewan Spence.
And I'm Liz Thompson.
And in this bonus episode, we look at the beauty and history of the scorecard. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Classic Baseball Radio's Clubhouse, somewhere where you've definitely never been before, because I'm making this up as I go along, and apparently I'm now in the 21st century, so all of the time that you've been used to listening to my voice over crackly AM from the 1940s, it doesn't sound that much different present day. Hello everybody, Ewan Spence here, and as you heard at the start of the show there, I'm joined today by Liz Thompson. Liz, welcome to the Clubhouse.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us why you're here.
Because my passion is baseball, and I've kind of taken on this mission of getting people to keep score again.
Scoring happens at every single game. We have to remember that, right up to the Major League. I love the fact that there's still, you have to send in a paper copy after a Major League game.
I've faxed those copies myself when I worked for the Orioles.
So you've been next to the official scorer?
Yes.
The last time I was over at the Brooklyn Cyclones, I actually got to see the person who was driving the at-bat software at the other end, who was putting the plays in. Not the official scorer. That surprised me. The official scorer was in another booth, locked away. So much magic in baseball, so much history. But I wanted to start and introduce yourself and bring you in, because scorecards are like a fundamental block of baseball. They're used today, they'll be used tomorrow, and they've been used going back decades. I mean, can we officially say it goes back 2 centuries now?
I would say the earliest in terms of what we know now is going to be in the 1860s. There are score books back to the 1840s, but a lot of those were very tally marks or just kind of the final score, but not tracking what actually happened.
So we should make a point here. We're talking about scorecards, not the box score, although your scorecard is what generates the box score.
Yes.
Why do scorecards interest you?
I've been scoring almost my entire life. So for me, it kind of evolved from this. I want my own scorebook in the style I want. So that's only for Major League games, not for rec league, doesn't have 12 batters. And I just said, I'm going to make it. And I did. And then people wanted it. And as a Sabre member, I started getting into the research behind it. And I kind of fell in love with it even more in the process. Because to me, and the way that it's even described in the early 1900s, is it's one of the best ways to learn baseball. It's one of the best ways to fall in love with baseball. And I find it's not a thing very much anymore. Not every ballpark sells scorecards, and I will constantly get comments that are like, I didn't know you could do that. I never learned how to do that, and I haven't done that in so long. So for me, it really is about growing the game, and it's something that I can do with scoring.
One of the things that fascinated me was the fact that you could get an entire game on one sheet of paper, and you're able to reconstruct a game from, if somebody just said, what about April the 17th, 1914? We can go to the records. We know the games that happened that day, and that fascinates me from an archaeology, a modern archaeology sense.
That's how it's been feeling because I'm trying to get back in with the systems that were created. And so I'm going through these documents and these periodicals that got released in the late 1800s. And I'm going to see a lot of stuff I don't need, but it's this dig to find the things I do need. And you talked about it being different compared to sports, it's actually modern. It's from 1979 in the Washington Post, where this writer calls it baseball's unique skeleton key. And just the way that we have something in baseball that you can dissect without video. I mean, like I said, you have records going back to the 1860s that tell you who did what.
All right, how far back can we go? What's the first scorecard that allows you to do the equivalent of a reconstruction?
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure about specifics, but I do know that in terms of what we know, the earliest formal is from October 11th, 1866, between the Brooklyn Atlantics and Philadelphia Athletics.
Now, no spoilers, don't give it away.
I actually have not looked it up. I just found out that it was one of the oldest, so I should look it up though.
Right, okay, so I need to keep the podcast going now until October the 11th so we can get the 140th anniversary?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's slightly before you actually had radio broadcasts, but can we just gloss over that bit for the fiction?
Well, if it's 250 for 76, it would be 160, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be 160.
I only know that because we're celebrating the 250th America's birthday. So
I suppose that when I say that, oh, great, there's a chance for the anniversary there. That's also one of the reasons I wanted to ask you into the first Clubhouse episode, because what we do here at Classic Baseball Radio when we're doing our reconstructions is we are going back to this information. We are using that to create what we know about the game. But what I am finding is that the history is so rich that every time I choose a game, there's a name, there's a record that they've been involved in. Almost every game seems to have a touchstone with history. What are those points that scorecards have given us over the years?
It's definitely wide-ranging. I would say starting with Henry Chadwick, who is British, but he is considered the father of baseball, and he created that very first system in the 1860s. However, the only surviving aspect of his system is the letter K for strikeout. He had a very convoluted system of instead of numbering by position, you numbered by their batting order. So very confusing because you had to figure out, okay, the guy at second is batting fourth. The guy at first is batting eighth. So the only thing that survived was the letter K from him. And then going past him, there were so many different ones. Spalding is another one, although Chadwick did also work with Spalding, but Spalding had his own stuff. Writers created their own. I would say after Chadwick, you would get into, I would say the 1920s is when you start to see more of what we recognize. Again, a lot of it was like you had a blank sheet of paper and you just decided how you were going to market. There were writers. I had one writer, MJ Kelly, and I found an article that said his scorecards looked like they escaped from Albert Einstein's chalkboard. So you have a lot of systems that, like, I've had some samples where I cannot figure out what is happening just by looking at it because it was their formula. And I've kind of established that keeping score is a language and we just all have our own dialect.
It's interesting how much it's kind of started to unify. Obviously we have live scorecards online, and you saw the sort of pretend lines of a scorecard sometime coming up in the bottom of the graphics in a televised game. But back then, and even to this day, it is a language and everybody has their own dialect. When did it all start to sort of come together? When was there a sort of the accents joining?
I honestly don't think it has, because I've now I have the design that started everything, that was just the system I like for my ADHD. I want to be able to just circle single, double, triple. But there are ones on just blank squares. You could have just the bag on it. And so I've designed several customs now. So the idea is just everybody can do it their way, but you learn from one way or the other. Because I know people who don't track batters on the bases. I know people who try and get every little detail they can, but I know other people who are just like, okay, single, done, double, done, strikeout, done. Like everybody has that own standard for themselves. And they always actually, this is from the 1904 article where the quote is, "Scorers vary it to suit their individual uses and in the course of a long experience often invent signs of their own." So they learn one thing, but then once you know how, you make it yours. I would say in terms of what we think was homogenized is probably around the 1950s, turn of the century, because of the way scorecards were becoming even more apparent in ballparks. I mean, they were being sold all the way back to the 1910s or before. But once you get to around the 1950s, you kind of have more people buying that scorecard at the ballpark and learning from that. And then, not to mention, the book that I really got my idea from for the system I like was for rec leagues. And every mom that kept score at a rec league game was using pretty much the exact same book. So, in terms of what options we have out there, yeah, it's a little less than what there were, but there's no wrong way.
Okay, so what's your unique bit of the language then? If I was to take your scorecard, what marks it out as being yours?
I would say mine's relatively simple because I do use that notation layout where I can circle, single, double, triple. If I'm not using that kind of book, because I will occasionally forget my book and buy a scorecard or use something else. And I am somebody that does these dashes. So I draw a line as if they got to first base, single dash, single, double. And some of those things that I learned over the years, I will also, on my regular book, I track hit direction. There are ones that do it in a different way where it's here's how this squiggly line, what it means. In some of these early systems, for me, I have a little field and I draw where it is. So I probably put a little more information. I try and track them around the bags, but I wouldn't say I have a whole language of my own.
I'm just saying, I better ask that question to myself, and I'm just having a look down. I'm trying to think, what is there that I do is unique? I actually have a very small design that I use that fits in a field notes book, which is purely for if I'm at a ballpark, which rarely happens given I'm in Scotland, but we have big fields that we pretend are ballparks. And it's just literally for keeping an eye on the game, but the bottom right corner of every box is where the ball was hit. Rather than draw the line or everything, it's just 7, 8, 9 for an outfield left, outfield center, outfield right, or in the inside as well. So I guess that's my unique little step in there.
You should definitely look at some of the systems that existed. There was one, I wish I could remember which writer it was, but it was they had a whole key for it. And it was if this line is a zigzag, it was this kind of hit. It was a line drive or bounced. And if it was a squiggle or if it was a straight line, and it was kind of funny because it was I couldn't even make it out on the sample card, but it was okay. Granted, I will say one of the page of the version I found had water damage. So I couldn't read everything, but it was kind of interesting the way that he had a similar system to what I had known, but he had that whole thing about squiggle lines, straight lines, zigzags, just to mean how the ball was hit.
You talked a little bit there about designing your own and people being interested. This is the diamond design, and you mentioned that right at the top. Tell us what's special about that.
So for me, I grew up I'm the youngest of four, so I learned from my mom at rec league games, whether it was mine or my siblings. So I use that system where it's relatively standard and it has the bag on it. And then it has on the side of each box, it says 1B, 2B, 3B, HR. It depends. Some have more options than others. And for me, with my ADHD, I always found that one a little like accommodating, because if I like wrote one part of it and then I looked up and something else happened and I looked down and realized I didn't finish, I have more of an idea of what I needed to do than if I have just a blank box. So for me, that was just how I like to score. But most of those books, again, were for rec leagues. And I just decided I want one with only 9 batters. And for me, I just posted a picture and people are like, I want one, I want one. And I made updates and changes. And then I also have other versions now. I have I have one with just the diamond. It's a smaller book, but for me, that was just the book that fit my needs. I actually had fun. It's one of the reasons why I do custom, because I enjoy it.
What's been the weirdest custom request you've had for the design then?
I don't know if I've really had weird, but the most surprising was I had Joe Posnanski reach out to me on Blue Sky. He messaged me randomly one day and he wrote, and this is my favorite part, he was like, I'm at Wrigley Field watching a game with Nick Offerman, if I can name drop. And so I'm sitting there going, my name got brought up with Nick Offerman? Well, okay. But Joe had me do one for his blog. It was kind of more inspired by those turn of the century cards that you would get at the ballparks. But that was probably been my favorite, because it's like, he's a New York Times bestselling author. And then I found some of my research from college, which was almost 12 years ago. And I had written his name down for a potential source. And I went, this is 12 years later, I find this piece of paper after I've worked with them. So I think that one's probably my favorite. I did do one for a guy that does tabletop baseball. So he wanted a book for when he plays tabletop. Like, I don't know which one he played, but I know like Stratomatic's one of them.
Is there a lost holy grail of scorecards?
I wouldn't necessarily know for sure. I have not gotten my eyes on some of the ones I really want to see. I've been looking for that writer, MJ Kelly. I couldn't find any. I'm waiting to hear back again from the Cincinnati Historical Society for some of Harry Wright's, and the Red Stockings had like some notorious ones. But in terms of like a holy grail, maybe a Chadwick one. I imagine they have to exist. I know the New York Public Library has a whole box of Chadwick stuff that I'm hoping one day I can get up there to see. But I would say his, honestly, because he is the father of baseball. And even though I probably would not be able to comprehend what he did, even though I've read his instructions several times, he's one that I'm kind of like fascinated by, and because of the way that he was like using numbers and letters and all sorts of things that if you looked at it today, you're like, huh?
Yeah, he could probably look at it and go, and this happened then, and this happened then, and then this happened then.
It was like a whole alphanumeric code. And the only thing, again, that stuck is the letter K for strikeout. More than that, he's a British man who became American in the most American way. But he also wrote guides for almost every sport. Him and Spalding kind of had the same function in those days in terms of these sports guides and instruction booklets and how to keep score. He had ones for cricket. He had scorebooks for cricket. So, I mean, before baseball, cricket was actually very popular here because it was mostly British colonies. But I would say it's starting to finally grow here. We have a major league cricket now. So.
And it's just another dialect, I would assume. It's another part of the tradition, but it is one of the things that gives baseball such a rich history and the ability to go back and look and listen and in our case, do our best to recreate some of those games.
The scoring is so integral beyond just the records. These articles that I've been finding just talk about how if somebody learns how to keep score, they'll love baseball and understand baseball in a way that they never knew they could. And that's, again, 1914, 1904. These articles are just talking about how it's something that can really make you appreciate baseball. I learned about the Orioles scorecards used to write, warning, keeping score may be habit forming. So for me, I think there's so much history, but it also is something that it slows down the game in an age where everything has to be faster.
Liz, as I said, it's been a delight to talk to you. Thanks very much for popping on.
Loved it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I mean, it's the first Clubhouse. Somebody has to go first. It was you, so...
I'm honored.
Tiny star of an asterisk somewhere. Obviously, you have the Diamond Design books out there. Where can people find out more and see if they can order one either off the shelf or custom?
So the website is www.diamondscorecarddesigns.com. I have physical books of different size, different number of games. I have a 6x9. And then I also have downloads, especially for the people that are international. Can't quite ship international yet, but you can still download one of the designs as a PDF off of my site.
And we will have links in the show notes on the podcast. And you can find more also at our website, which is classicbaseballradio.com. But for now, this is only the first time. There's probably a really interesting and exciting cliche that I'm going to work out how to end these podcast episodes on, but I haven't quite found it yet. I think I might just, for now, end these how I end the radio broadcast. That's your final question, that's your final inning, that's your game, and that's your podcast. You've been listening to Classic Baseball Radio's Clubhouse, hosted by Ewan Spence with Liz Thompson of Diamond Scorecard Designs. Follow Classic Baseball Radio on Spotify, YouTube, and online at classicbaseballradio.com.